An unskilled adventurer named Rentt works in a guild and earns money, but one day he finds himself encountering a dragon. He is killed by the dragon and wakes up as an undead skeleton. He kills other skeletons and slime to get the power and turns into a ghoul. A kind girl helps him and he returns to his town again. The anime begins in a beautiful dungeon where a boy is standing. He's the main character of the anime named Rentt, a 25-year-old boy. He's looking very scared. Meanwhile, a monster reaches there. He says he has to become a mithril adventurer. The boy knows that he's going to be killed by the monster. Then the monster attacks the boy. After a while, Rentt wakes up and finds himself near a pond of water. He is shocked when he looks at his face in the water and finds himself a skeleton. He's shocked by all this and wonders how it could have happened. The scene shifts to the past, where Rentt wakes up early in the morning. He says that poor adventurers and other people have to wake up early in the morning. Only those who are rich nobles sleep till noon. It comes to light that the main character is a lower-level adventurer. He gets ready, reaches a guild, and starts looking for a job. He also talks with other adventurers, and then they go away on their adventure. After this, Rentt decides to go to the labyrinth of the moon's reflection for his adventure. He tells all the explorers and adventurers to visit this place completely. There will be nothing for him to do to explore special things there, but when he reaches there, he finds a secret way. The way seems like a completely unexplored area, but he says he will find a special or valuable thing there. Even though he is unable to find it, when he gives the guild information about this area, they will reward him. He starts walking and thinks any other adventurer of his rank will not come to theft alone. He's the one who came because he's a fool. He enters the room, but the thing he sees there is beyond his thinking capacity. He finds a big dragon. It's the highest ranking dragon among all the monsters, and it looks different from other dragons. Rentt is shocked and can't move because of fear. Rentt can't do anything against the dragon. He's an ordinary adventurer before the dragon. The scene again focuses on the present, where Rentt is sitting. He is alive against the rules of their god. He thinks if he goes back then, guild people will kill him because he's a skeleton now. He can't decide what he has to do. He tells anyone who cannot describe the origin of the powerful dragon that they can be transformed into any shape. He is going one way and finds a slime but starts going another way. He says that when they defeat any monster, they will find other obstacles. But he's not yet in that condition to fight with anyone. He thinks he will wait there for any adventurer seeking help who comes there alone. At the same time, he comes to know that he can't talk anymore. Suddenly, another skeleton appears there. Rentt goes to fight, but he feels his body is very heavy. A human can easily defeat a skeleton. He raises his sword, but cannot bear its burden. He came to know that he could not use his sword technique anymore. Then he checks his other techniques, and he can use his other techniques. He fights with the skeleton and wins over it. The skeleton dies, and all its powers and abilities are transferred to Rentt. Now that he is more powerful than before, it has come to light that monsters have a mysterious element. They can become powerful beings with it, Rentt says, but humans can also become powerful with hard training. Rentt remembers his friend saying that the monster's way is different. Whatever they do, they will still be monsters. They can evolve toward a goal called existential evolution, and that's her topic of research. In the present, Rentt understands the situation and says he can also evolve into a ghoul. He starts fighting with the monsters and then decides to fight against the Grand Dragon. Meanwhile, he sees a slime. Rentt says they are weaker than skeletons, but he doesn't have to underestimate their power. He says it's hard to kill them by physical attacks, but easily defeated with magic. Rentt could not use his magic, so he started fighting it. He attacked its core and defeated it. Rentt takes its core and collects its juice. The juice is useful in making skin soft, and girls also use it in cosmetic form. The scene shifts to the guild, where a girl named Sheila is sitting. She's a new adventurer and is inexperienced, but she knows swordsmanship. The man asks if she finds the girl for the new adventurer, but the girl says she postpones the plan. She wants to get help from Rentt, but he won't come back tomorrow. The other girl wants money, so she tells him to go to the labyrinth of the moon's reflection. The scene comes to Rentt, who kills a lot of monsters and skeletons, but he doesn't become a ghoul yet, or it seems that existential evolution is so easy in Noor. Rentt feels he's not hungry or thirsty. He tries to eat something, but the mask comes out of his body. This is because he's undead, but he becomes powerful and also starts using his mana divinity. He purified bread so he could preserve it for more days. He will eat it later. He decides to kill all the monsters slowly until he becomes a ghoul. He is more powerful than before, so he can defeat 3 to 4 slimes at a time. But he could not face more than it. If they attacked, then he had to run away. But he's not going to face 3 or more slimes at a time. If they attach, then he will be killed. He's worried. He could not kill, even after 10 years of becoming an adventurer. If he includes 10 years of training them, these are 20 years, but now he can use 3 odd techniques at a time. Any high-ranking adventurer could not use these techniques together. He worries and says he is not worthy of becoming an adventurer. Normally, people like him start looking for other work and leave the job of adventurer, but he believes that he will have many things to do with him. He took help from his friends to teach him about monsters and magic. He fights with slime, and that directly attacks its core and defeats it. The slime ends there, and Rentt is sure about his power. Rentt has to collect the fluids of slime because he can sell it. All the power of slime starts transferring into his body, and suddenly he feels that flesh starts coming into his body. It means he's becoming a ghoul. A lot of flesh has transformed in him. He transformed into a ghoul, but is looking very weird. He has a belief that if he started walking on his way, one day he would achieve his goal. Then he will become a high-ranking vampire. So now, the flesh has come into his body, so he tries to talk but cannot. He can make a noise, but his words are not clear. He needs practice for this. He starts practicing, and it seems like a zombie is talking. Rentt is fighting with 2 goblins in a dungeon. He says they are more dangerous in brute form, but he's in a dungeon, so he's fighting with 2 or 3 of them. He says that, according to existential evolution, he has much more power than a skeleton. His mana, spiritual energy, and divinity are filling, and he can use them collectively. And then he fights with goblins and defeats them. After a while, he hears a noise and sees that a girl is fighting with a skeleton. Rentt sees a human after a long time. He tries to recognize her, but he cannot. He knows all the girls where he works, and the girl is not from there. It seems she's a new adventurer. Rentt tries to go, but he thinks the girl will be afraid of him and will try to kill him. The girl starts going her way, and Rentt is looking at her behind a wall. He thinks the place is very dangerous. Then a skeleton appears behind the girl, trying to attack her. She fights with the skeleton very well, but she can't because she's weak. There's no way for her to run. She says she can't defeat a skeleton. She uses her sword, but the skeleton holds her sword. Meanwhile, Rentt reaches there and fights with the skeleton. He cuts him into pieces, and the girl is impressed by him. When he tries to talk to her, she gets afraid and asks him to leave. Rentt says there is no need to be afraid, and he puts down his sword, and then the girl feels relaxed. He tells her that he's also an adventurer, and his name is Rentt. She asks why he looks like this, and he tells her his whole story. She says anyway that he doesn't look like a normal monster, and she believes him. She says she wants to go back if he can help her, and Rentt says yes in response. He asks her to help him. He says he wants to go back home, but he can't go in this condition. He needs some clothes. The girl agrees with him, then thanks him for saving her and tells him her name is Rina, the daughter of a knight. Rentt gives her some money and asks her to buy some clothes and other things for him. Rina agrees and takes the money. She keeps her distance from him because she has a fear of being killed by him. Rentt thinks an adventurer must stay away from a stranger like him, and he believes that an adventurer must inform the guild about the situation. The girl reached out to the guild to inform them about Rentt. On the other hand, Rentt fights with a slime. He says he can't believe that he became so powerful when he was a human. He is strong, and he can turn his body anywhere. His vision is looking better than before. They probably just called it combat intuition. He's talking to himself, and soon Rina reaches there. She's searching for him there. She asks if he's Rentt or anyone else. He tells her he is Rentt, and she becomes relaxed and says he is talking better than before. Rentt says he practices for it, and then he comes to her to take his money, but she's still afraid of him. Rentt is worried that she doesn't believe in him. She apologizes for her behavior, and then he wears his dress. He's looking handsome in it. His vision is lessened due to the hood, but it's to kill 2 to 3 monsters. There's also a strip to cover his hands and feet. Rentt becomes emotional and thinks about what a good girl she is. He could not weep because he was a ghoul, but he made a face like he was weeping. Then she gives him a mask to hide his face. He covers his face with the mask, but the mask is attached to his face. He tries to remove it but cannot. Rina apologizes to him for this and tells him that she bought it because it's cheaper. Rentt tries to use divinity. Rina is amazed that he can use this power. Rentt could not remove the curse mask and says that the curse activates when it sticks to the face. He asks Rina not to worry because he just has to hide his face. He put his hand on her but pushed it back, but she said there was no need. She held his hands, but his hands were still trembling. Rentt says she does not need to force herself so much. Rina asks him to return to Malt and they go away, sitting in a carriage. Rina says she was registered in a guild in the capital city. There are also powerful adventurers there, but she's so weak compared to them. Rentt says he's amazed that she left the big city and came to a little town. She says yes in response and says she wants to see the outside world.
Rina and Rentt talk to each other in a carriage and laughed. They reach a city and go inside, but Rentt says he can't go there. Many people know him, and the situation will get worse when they learn about his identity. She says they have to choose another gate where people don't know him. She suggests the north gate. On the way, Rentt thanks her for all this, but Rina asks him not to worry. She thinks she's alive because of him. If he doesn't come for her help, then she will be killed. They reach the gate, and the guards tell them to show their adventurer's IDs to them. They let Rina go inside but stop Rentt and asked him to show his ID. He shows them, but they are suspicious of him and say they haven't seen him before. After this, they ask him to show his face to them, but Rina says his mask is cursed and he can't remove it. She says that while fighting with a monster, he injured himself a lot and used this mask, but it's cursed. The guard thinks it's true and says that's why he could not talk well. Rentt says they can check his mask by removing it. They are stunned. Rina says they will not do him any harm by touching him. Then they allowed them to go inside the city. Suddenly, Rentt disappears from there. Rina looks for him, but she cannot find him. Rentt is looking at her from behind a wall and says she's a good girl. When he starts looking like a human, he will thank her. At night, he reaches home and says Rina is a good girl and he can't involve her in all this. He needs a human to help him. He opens the door himself, and his old friend Lorraine is sleeping on a bed. He tries to wake her up, but she doesn't. He says he will drop the book on her head, and she understands that he's Rentt. She is stunned to look at him and asks what's up. He shows his hands to her.
Lorraine sits at a table and thinks about Rentt's whereabouts. She thinks it's useless to find him alone. Maybe she needs help from the guild to inform her about him. Then the doorbell rings and she goes to sleep. Meanwhile, Rentt comes inside her room and she's stunned to look at his condition. He tells his whole story, but she can't believe all this. She studied monsters and magic, but could not see any cases like it. She says she can believe that a dragon eats him and becomes undead by looking at his condition. Rentt thinks he is looking less like her friend and more like a test subject for her. She asks if the dragon is still in the dungeon, and he says maybe he's not there. It comes to light that Lorraine is not a sage, magician, or adventurer. She just researches different subjects. She wants to know whether he's Rentt or not, but she believes that he's real. She estimates his answer because Rentt also talks like this. She says to put all this aside and talks about his plan. Rentt says he still wants to become an adventurer. He wants to reach mythical rank. In other words, he's asking her a favor. She says so. He wants her to take a quest for him, and he also has to live with her because he doesn't have money to pay rent. He says yes in reply, but she's not going to do all this for him for free. He has to help her with research. Lorraine says that for the first time, she gets a chance to directly determine if a person is going through existential evolution. He asks if she will kill him, and she says she may take some meat from his body. In the next scene, Rentt is cleaning the house when Lorraine comes back, taking his money. She says he has brought the best things so the payment is good. Rentt goes to the town where everyone looks at him weirdly. He reaches a shop where he has to get his sword ready. At first, the shopkeeper gets afraid, but later she asks about his skills. He says he can use divinity, magic, spiritual energy, and mana. The girl says it's very rare. Her husband is also there. Rentt asks her to keep this information secret and not tell people about him. He says she can contact Lorraine if she needs his help. On the other hand, Lorraine is trading books. She reads that ghouls don't kill very easily. They like humans because they like meat. They also have physical abilities. It's written in theories that they respond to human dead bodies. They lose their emotions and memories with time, but she thinks that he's no one else but Rentt. She remembers a past story. She was very young and going for his task. A boy is ready to go with her. He is a new adventurer. She allowed him to go with her. They taught in a forest, but could not find the medicine or the plant. It comes to light that she became a professor at such an early age, but people are not happy. They don't appreciate her, but she becomes a silver rank professor, moves on to search, and finally gets the plant. She calls the boy, but sees that the boy already has a lot of herbs. She rebuked him for not doing everything himself, but instead, she looked at the herbs. These are the same plants that she's searching for. She's shocked by this. Then they see a monster there, and the boy takes out his sword to fight with it. After a few destructions, they defeat it, and the boy gives her water to drink. She is a three-named boy, and he says his name is Rentt. She says she always remains with guards, and people are always around her, so she could not get a chance to combat. The boy says the people are upset with her, so they send him to take care of her. The boy knows about herbs and plants, and the girl, Lorraine, also says that she likes herbs. They talk with each other, and thus their friendship starts. Rentt says he will teach her about herbs. They have been friends for many years. The scene again shifts to the present, where Rentt comes out of the shop. They assign him the new sword, and the husband of the shopkeeper says he will make another best sword for him. They shook hands, and then Rentt went away to his destination. After his departure, the husband and his wife talk about him. They recognize him and say he's having difficulty, but he doesn't share anything with them. Even though he doesn't ask them for help, the wife asks if they are so unreliable. Her husband says no. It seems that he's suffering from a curse, and he doesn't want to make them upset for him. The things that are happening explain his real identity, but he's hiding something inside. But they are ready to make another strong case for him because they know he is ready to become their customer. The scene shifts to the home where Rentt makes delayed food and Lorraine is eating it. She asks if he will not eat it, and he says he doesn't feel hungry. His goal is to become like a human. He will go back to the dungeon to kill the monsters to rank up. In the next scene, a man is fighting with a big slime in Labyrinth. The slime is very powerful. The man is going to be killed, but Rentt reaches there. He saves that man by killing the slime, and the man faces an injury. Rentt is going back. The man stops him and says to take him to his side. Anyone doesn't want to take him to their party. He's a cook, and he has to pay a lot of debt, so he starts this work. He has to pay the debt in the next week, so he says everyone should take him. Anyone doesn't allow him because he's completely new to it, so that's why they don't take him. He begged before him, but Rentt says he's so busy he has to go. Rentt goes away, but the man is still asking him. He thinks he might be helpful to him. Rentt thinks maybe he can hold the baggage. He tells the man to let go with him. They start walking on a different route and start searching. After searching, they could not find anything. They see another passage, and they start to go inside. The man says if they inform the guild about this, they will pay them for it, but becomes quite upset after saying this. He says it's his search, so he will not say anything about it. It will be his. Rentt says don't worry. He can inform himself in the guild, but now he has to do another work. Then they reach inside the empty room. The new adventurer goes forward, but Rentt can see a red light. He knows that the man could not see that light. He tries to stop him, but unfortunately, the adventurer goes inside a magic circle. The man teleports to a different place. Rentt is looking at all this. He doesn't go back like an ordinary adventurer. He comes near the circle and says, so it's a magic circle. He will find a lot of monsters or undead in it. Soon, he also went inside the magic circle to help that adventurer. He teleported to the place where the new adventurer had already teleported. A giant skeleton reached there in a boss room, and Rentt took out his sword against it to fight.